pretty slow trickle. His industry contacts have told him that they'd still love to try what he's doing, but in order to switch, they now need to have feature X. He went away and built feature X and came back to them, but now they're saying they need feature Y and Z. It feels that every time Barry is close to landing clients, they will want more stuff, and it never seems to be enough. Barry just really, really strongly believes that people will just give his product a try, they'd really understand the value it delivers. But when he talks to them on kind of discovery calls, there's some disconnect there. Like he's explaining the product, but they're sort of comparing him to other products in the market, which he doesn't think is a fair comparison. He then jumps into kind of listing all the features. Well, my product does X, Y, and Z, and this one doesn't. But rather than people getting it, they just sort of seem to be overwhelmed and a little bit confused by what his product does. Now, the other character in this story is Marta. Now, Marta's in a slightly different position. Marta also has good product sense, but she's always been really strong on sales and marketing. She's a classic executive. As such, unlike Avocado Co, Banana Co has been acquiring users at a really nice rate. Marta is spending a good 3 days a week honing her outbound campaign and hopping on demo calls with prospective customers. When she started, she was getting like 1.5% response rate from her emails. Now it's close to 5%, and it feels like every few weeks it's ticking up a quarter of a percent, a quarter percent. So she's really honing in. This is leading to 3 or 4 demos a day, of which she's closing at least one. In fact, she's got so many inbound and so much interest that she's got too many demo requests she can handle. So she's starting to think about maybe hiring an SDR or a CX person to help with onboarding and take the pressure off. Marta's also been having early success with things like content marketing, SEO. She's been exploring paid search. As such, Marta's really nailing the acquisition part of the journey. The problem is, and this is a little bit hidden, particularly to her investors, is she's realized that they've got a big churn problem. It turns out that maybe only a quarter of the people that she speaks to and agree to sign up actually finish their onboarding. And more, worrying is that only 5% of those total people are active after 30 days. And even those ones that are active, it feels like about 15% are churning month on month. At this rate, all of her new customers will be gone in 12 months' time. So for Marta and Banana Co, something around the product just isn't landing. People aren't finding the value quick enough. They're not baking it into their workflow, and they're leaving before they've hit that payback time. Marta's tried playing around with an onboarding tour, one of those things where you join and little pop-ups come explaining the interface, but it really hasn't done much. As such, she's starting to get really nervous around her activation and retention, and she's worried that it's going to be really hard to close her next round. Now, while these two stories and these two actors in this talk are fictionalized, they're actually really good examples of the sorts of challenges I come across every day and the sorts of people I come across every day. In fact, Barry and Martha are really a fictionalized version, an anonymized version of about 3 or 4 founders I've worked with, in the past. So I guess my first question is, can any of you relate to either Barry or Martha or both stories? If you can, please just stick a pin on which one you feel more related to, Barry or Martha, at the moment. So a little cluster in the middle, some people feeling a little bit of both, a bit of a skew maybe towards Barry, which doesn't surprise me. One of the things I find with a lot of early stage founders is a lot of us are product people at heart. And so we end up kind of leaning into that kind of early stage sort of product problem. I do meet a few founders who are really, really amazing sort of sales and marketers, more on that executive side of things. But it's quite common that to come across the sort of the Barrys of this world. Brilliant. Great. Well, it's good to know who's in the room. So the next thing I'm going to ask is if you could give me a little bit of an idea, if you are working in a startup, either you're a founder or you're working on a product team there, like what are your biggest growth challenges at the moment? Is it a challenge with getting signups, which seems to be one of the problems that Barry has? Or is it kind of turning those signups into users? Maybe it's turning those users into paying customers. Or as we've seen with Marta, maybe the problem is keeping those customers engaged in order to maintain retention and produce churn, or maybe there's something else that's going on in your world at the moment. So I'll give you a few more minutes just to fill this in. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Okay. So, hello, Butterworld. My name's Andy, and as Jacob sort of very kindly said on the introduction, I am a former kind of design and product leader turned investor advisor and coach. I spend part of my work working as a venture partner with Camp, one of Europe's top pre-seed and seed funds, where I look after a portfolio of around a dozen early stage startups. And I spend the rest of my time advising founders like Barry and Marta on a sort of a private basis. And obviously, if any of you are founders and you want to have a chat afterwards, drop me an email and I'd love to kind of talk to you about some of your challenges. I help founders pretty much figure out a few things. I help them figure out their go-to-market strategy, help them figure out how to find early clients, and ultimately iterate to this thing that we call product market fit. Now, I'm sure most of you in this sort of chat are sort of industry veterans and know what the term product market fit means, but it's generally seen partly as the point that your product has got to, where you've hit on a version of your product that solves a really clear and meaningful problem and which is starting to deliver real tangible value to your users. So the product is kind of really landing home and people are kind of getting value out of it. It's also the point where the market starts to realize this. So you figured out how to connect that value that your product purports to deliver in a language your users understand. And that means that they're finally getting what your product does and why they should give it a try. In order to reach product market fit, you first need to convince people to try your product. And to do this, you need to kind of figure out something I call language market fit. And language market fit is the right framing and language to sort of frame your product to make customers go, oh, I get what this is. Also, I think a few people on the call might have their microphones still on. So if you could sort of turn the microphones off, that'd be really great because I've got a little bit of background audio coming in. But thank you very much. So language market fit is really, really important because if people don't understand and get what your product is, then they're not even going to bother giving it a try. And if they're not going to bother getting a try, they're not going to use all of the amazing features that you have on offer. So in the early examples, I would argue that Barry is experiencing a market-related problem. So far, he's been able to find enough of the right kind of customers willing to give his product a try. There was something in the way he was positioning and pitching the product that just wasn't landing, wasn't sparking, and then he wasn't able to do enough high-quality sales and marketing to get enough users into the platform. It is possible that Barry has the best product out there, but if you can't convince enough people to come and give the product a try, you'll just never know. You'll never know whether your product is landing. So Barry has this sort of market-related problem. Marta, on the other hand, has, as you've seen, cracked the market side of the equation. Like she's really good at bringing people into the product, but she's having problems with the product itself. She's been able to do the positioning. She's been able to find where people are. She's been able to bring them in, but they're just not sticking around. The product wasn't delivering enough value early enough. Maybe it wasn't getting embedded in people's workflow soon enough or deep enough. And it clearly wasn't delivering enough value consistently over time to keep people using the product until it's sort of baked into their sort of daily workflow and their habituation. As a result, people are coming in, they're being charmed by Marta, but then a month later, a very, very sizable portion of them are no longer there. So all of that effort has been wasted. This is really the early sort of stage and nature of startups. Early stage anything really. Early stage growth almost always resembles this kind of S curve. Your early efforts in figuring out product market fit take time. Not every company gets there. However, once you sort of landed that perfect formula, and once you've figured out product market fit, growth starts to tick up. You're now not having to figure out the product, you're just having to scale it by activating and growing your acquisition channels. And eventually, like all products and all initiatives, eventually things will slow out. Now, one thing that's worth noting is that most startups aren't a single S curve. They're actually a whole group of S curves that are kind of layered on top of one another. So what I'd really love to do, first of all, is just to get an idea of where you are in this journey. Like how many of you are at the really, really early stages? Please put a pin on the curve. How many of you are a little bit later and you've got product market fit and you reckon and you're kind of trying to kind of scale and grow? Be lovely to see where folks are. Awesome, awesome, awesome. So it's nice to see that a few people have kind of reached those hallowed grounds of product market fit, maybe some really close by, but most people are kind of just slightly at that edge of like, have they found it yet? Product market fit is one of those weird things. It's quite difficult to define, but people say that once you have it, you'll know. So I think if there's any nervousness around like, do we have this thing? Then you probably haven't. And it might even be that some of the people that believe they've reached product market fit haven't quite yet, because generally that demand is sort of taking off there. It's clear that people are loving what you're doing. They're sharing it around. And it looks like we've got a few people that are right in the middle of that growth phase, which is wonderful. So, in the startup world, that kind of pre-product market fit we call the 0 to 1 phase. And while most of the stuff I'm going to be talking about today really is kind of focused on that 0 to 1 stage, these are really kind of generalist growth strategies, and so they can work anywhere. But for the vast majority of people in this room, as you can see, who are in that kind of 0 to 1 pre-product market fit stage, I think this is going to be really, really helpful to you. Now, I see one of the big problems when it comes to growth is that a lot of the growth advice out there that I see, and there's tons of it out there, there's loads of newsletters, there's loads of podcasts, there's a bunch of books, there's all kinds of Medium articles. But a lot of the growth is really assuming you have product market fit already. A lot of the advice is good advice, but it often comes from the suggestions like, hey, go out and hire a dedicated growth PM or hire a team of growth marketers or growth designers, building out a specialist team. Often the advice is around, hey, we just need to kind of like explore these, different channels with loads of money and start seeing how it all comes in. A lot of it is much more, particularly when it comes to product-led growth, a lot of it is like leaning heavily into building out a team of amazing product people that can kind of push your product forward. But there's very little advice out there, I find, for really, really early stage founders. That's why, and again, this is my little pitch to you, that's why I wrote my new book, is The Growth Equation. So The Growth Equation is a book that's purely aimed at kind of early stage founders, people who are mostly pre-PMF, who are looking to figure out GTM, who are looking to find their early users, improve their product and scale to product market fit. And the book came about through, as we said before, I've been working in venture for about 4 years now, and I've been working in design for about 25 years. And every time I speak to one of my founders that I'm coaching or advising, I spotted another number of patterns which seem to trip them up on a regular basis. And rather than just helping people, or rather than people having those same problems over and over again, I've tried to sort of put them into a bit of a thesis. And that thesis I'm calling the growth equation. And the growth equation is basically 7 elements which I have noticed have an outside effect on early stage growth. And I go into the arguments of the growth equation in a little bit. But I want people to realize that this growth equation really is just a high level framing. It's if you're familiar with the kind of the movie world, it's a handy MacGuffin to hang the rest of the book on. So the growth equation is literally the first chapter in the book, and the rest of the book is all about how people can actually apply the elements of the growth equation. So the other thing I want to say is the growth equation isn't definitive. It's not one of these books where I'm just saying, hey, look, I've invented this brand new thing. No one's ever heard about it before. All the stuff in here is pretty obvious. There are no silver bullets in this talk. I'm not going to give you a brand new piece of information you've never heard before, and you're suddenly going to go, oh, wow, my life has changed. This talk is actually much more about going back to basics, going back to first principles. A lot of the problems I see, a lot of the founders I see, kind of think that their product is kind of unique, and that like these kind of things aren't related to them. They have to go off and they try and find this amazingly new, clever solution to their unique problem. But generally what happens is almost all of the challenges they face end up ultimately relating back to one of these 7 concepts. And so I find it as a really useful diagnosis tool. If you're having growth problems, start looking at your product through the lens of one of these 7 arguments, and you might find a quicker way to kind of figure out a problem rather than trying to sort of find a needle in a haystack. Okay, so the growth equation is effectively broken down into kind of market parts of the equation and product parts of the equation. And so I'm going to start talking about the market parts of the equation that are affecting Barry. The first one, again, like I said, these are all no-brainers, is audience. I meet so many founders who, like Barry, go straight into building mode, build an amazing product, but when they launch, they have zero audience. And so a big part of your approach to growth is building up as big an audience as possible. Now, this isn't kind of like your Sam, Tom, Tam kind of like, total addressable market. These are the people that you are currently connected with or can connect with. These are your social media followers. These are the people on your mailing list and your sign up list. These are the people who are following you on LinkedIn. These are the people who you can connect to in a meaningful way. If you don't have a big audience, you're not going to be able to reach out to them and bring them into your product. These can't just be general audiences as well. I think a lot of people just have a big audience of social media followers who aren't interested in the product. So this has to be an audience of people that specifically have the problem your product solves, are ideally aware of the problem, aware they have that problem, and aware that your product might be a solution. So a big part of this growth equation is like building a big, healthy audience. However, not all problems are created equally. In the startup world, we have this idea of vitamins versus painkillers. Painkillers are big, powerful, hair on fire problems that people are really highly motivated to fix. While vitamins are quite low priority problems. And so another big part of your job is not just having a big audience, but increasing that motivation. Motivation, having a highly motivated audience, is like a magnet that draws people through your sign up flow. All of the annoying things they have to do, all of the signing up and filling in their profiles and picking a new username and all that kind of stuff, you can get over if people are highly motivated. If they're not motivated, they're not going to stick around. And so motivation is big. And so a big part of your early marketing isn't just to find your audience, but to motivate them, to get them to kind of draw them through your product. The other kind of big part of the market equation is kind of the opposite. It's a negative thing. It's your competition. Now, when I talk to people about their competition, they always over-index on people that are direct competitors. They'll look at their exact ICP and their exact feature set, and they go, "Oh no, there's nobody competing in their market space." Often that's hubris. A lot of founders think that their baby is the most beautiful baby or the smartest kid in school, and they don't see anybody else's competition. You've got to zoom back and you've got to really make sure that you understand the competitive market. A lot of the time, your competition might not even be from people that are operating in your space. For a lot of early stage founders, particularly in SaaS businesses, your competition might be a free spreadsheet online. I meet so many people when I talk to them. It's like, well, how are people using how are people currently solving this problem? And it'll be, oh, they're using a free Google Sheets. And they're like, oh, and your product now, well, it will be £100 a month, per seat kind of SaaS product. You've got to realize that the attraction of a free Google Sheet that pretty much does the same job, but maybe a little bit less sophisticatedly, is quite a difficult amount of friction to change. And so really understanding your competitive landscape and looking at what everyone else is trying to do to pull you away from your product, I think is really important. So I'm curious to know whether anybody in your current product have experienced any of these market issues. Are you struggling with a big enough audience who are discovering your product? Are you struggling to make sure that the people that do discover your product are motivated enough to draw them into the acquisition funnel and to keep them going through until they activate? Or are you finding that the competition is too stiff? Either you're fighting against companies that are better funded, that are later stage, or maybe you're fighting to convince people that they need to move away from that free sort of Google Sheet. Brilliant. Okay. So as these just sort of slowly roll in. So many founders fail at the market side of PMF because they believe that the best product always wins. It's this idea of the Field of Dreams fallacy, if by the movie of the same name, if you build it, they will come. I know as a product person, I myself have kind of fallen for this fallacy, many times. It's really easy to believe that the best products outcompete the worst products. And I wish that was true. But I've seen so many times in my journey, both as a designer and now as a VC, that often the better products wither on the vine because no one is finding them, no one is using them. While actually often mediocre products that start to gain a head of steam, that start to get big audiences, that start to get motivated, that those audiences start to tell their friends about because they solve a problem in a meaningful way, even if they're not perfect. You often see that the best products don't win. It's the best, the best marketed products often win, which is a real shame. And so one of the challenges, if you are a product focused person rather than marketing focused person, when acquisition falls flat, it's really tempting to think, well, the way I solve this problem is adding more features, adding more product. This is often described as the next feature fallacy. The idea that maybe the last feature you added didn't kind of create the growth you wanted, but maybe the next one will. In my experience, that very rarely happens. So what are some of the things that Barry can do to solve his market problem? I'd love you to kind of put some of your thoughts and ideas around your Barry. You're stuck in this problem where you're kind of struggling to get people into your product. They're not understanding it. They're not understanding the value. In this instance, what would you do? What hypotheses would you have? What projects would you kick off? What maybe features you would add or initiatives you would do in order to start kickstarting that kind of market side of the problem? And while you do that, I'm going to give you a little bit more time and I'm going to have a little swig of my tea here. Brilliant. This is good. So yes, some message testing, understanding and trying different messages. I think that's a really, really good idea. I think trying out a few different channels, seeing which channels kind of work. Yep, I think doing a little bit of a review of your messaging to see what's going on there, that's always a good thing. I see a lot of people putting out really low quality, sort of, I call this background radiation messaging. They're just kind of like doing their job, marketers kind of just pushing stuff out, but that stuff is not really landing. Brilliant. Looks like a lot more people adding. I think checking out what the competitor's doing is always good, although quite often I find that a lot of the reason why people are struggling to communicate their value is because they're not distinguishing the market. And so I think it's really good to look at what the competitors are doing. Sometimes the right approach is to kind of follow their suit. Sometimes the right approach is to almost deliberately take an alternative angle, which is also a great way to understand competitive analysis. Brilliant. Well, what can Barry do? So from my perspective, the first thing is finding the right beachhead customer. Now, most startups, I find, focus on something they call an ideal customer profile, or ICP. And when you're pitching, to a VC, this ICP is often like the really big, meaty, often wealthy segment that's going to drive most growth. However, when I see founders going after their ICP on day one, they often really struggle because these ICPs tend to be fairly mature businesses with very specific needs. They tend to be big companies with long buying cycles that also tend to avoid risk. They tend to have, quite complicated processes for finding the right people to buy. These ICPs tend to be quite risk averse. They tend to need security. They tend to need complex user sort of account management. And so this is often one of the reasons why Barry is kind of going to his big friends in the industry and they keep asking for more features and more features and more features. They are probably an ICP that are kind of struggling with this. And so you really need something which I call a beachhead customer. Beachhead customers are usually smaller customers that have got a really, really specific problem. Often these are the problems that the bigger suppliers don't care about. They've been a client of one of your competitors for a while. They've been asking for this particular feature or this particular capability for many, many years. and the incumbent company that's used to selling to these ICPs are looking at your small, tiny market and going, it's not even worth our effort to put you on the backlog. So you've got people who are feeling underserved, they're feeling neglected. These are the perfect people to create a beachhead. And beachhead comes from the sort of military term. I don't like to use a lot of military terminology because, ultimately we're building products. We're not, planning a kind of a land invasion. But a beachhead is an opportunity to find a small piece of land that is not very well defended, that you can point all of your resources at. You can go in strong. You can take that group of customers really, really easily, and then you can land. You can start marshalling your resources, and you grow to the next beach, and the next sector, and the next sector, and the next sector. And so, really honing your beachhead rather than going too broad. And you might want to try 2 or 3 beachheads, but really, really having a specific beachhead customer, I think, is an important thing to narrow the focus. And obviously, if you have a really good beachhead, a really, really tight target, getting your positioning is much easier, which is the next thing. Barry really needs to make sure that his messaging is landing with his customers. And the fact that he's continually jumping into a list of features to describe means that, tells me that he doesn't really understand. And sorry, there is somebody that's got their mic on. If you could turn it off, that'd be really, really handy. Thank you.
I'm managing it, Andy. So
awesome. Thank you very much. So, and sorry to break the flow. And I do this all the time, so no worries. But yeah. So nailing the proposition. If you're having to kind of give people, if you're selling on features, often that means that you haven't really understood what your product does. Like you're not being able to describe it. And if you're not being able to describe it, you just naturally go into this kind of easy way of going, oh, well, it's like X, but it does X, Y, Z. Often people struggle, their pitch is full of buzzwords. I often, see companies, with their websites like, well, we leverage B2B data analysis in an AI market world, and you're just like, I have no idea what you're saying. Often they are trying to kind of copy the big boys that kind of have really, really fancy, big impressive sounding websites, but often these websites don't mean anything. So really, really honing your positioning. And one of the ways to do that is to use the right language. Listen to the language that your existing customers use to describe you. I meet so many founders that when they're doing customer discovery, their customers say, oh, your product's a little bit like X. And they go, no, it's not like X. It's like Y, Z. And they try and convince the customer that they know their product better than the customer. And I get that, it's tempting we want to school our customers. It's much better to go, oh, that's interesting. I wonder why our customers think our product is like X, and maybe that's a better framing. Obviously, picking the right channel. I either see startups that try and spread themselves far too thin. They're on X, and they're on LinkedIn, and they're on Threads, and they're on Blue Sky, and they're on Medium, and they've got a newsletter. And what they're doing often is they're putting really poor, mediocre content on all of them. And then they're wondering why those channels don't work, and they're blaming the channels. Like, you've really got to hone in. Most of the research shows that the vast majority of growth, the vast majority of customers for early stage startups come from a single channel. You're much better off, again, with that beachhead analogy, marshalling your resources onto one channel that works, really, really honing it, really, really getting your message right, really getting your follower count right, and really, really driving people to kind of convert. And so understanding your channel and doing channel experiments to figure that out quickly is massively important. And a lot of this for me comes to founder-led growth. I think one of the big problems that people like Barry are facing is that their happy place is in product. And so often they're thinking, well, I'll outsource growth to somebody else. I'll hire a marketing manager and they produce mediocre marketing content. You hire somebody head of GTM, but they're maybe not very good at that. You hire a salesperson and it turns out 6 months later, they haven't closed a single sale. And a lot of this is because you want to go back to your happy place in product. I think that as a founder, even if you're really good at product, your primary job is to deliver growth. You need to deliver growth so you can get the customers to check your product is working. You need to deliver growth so you can make sure your funders that you've had in the last round to feel confident that they'll back you in the next round. And you need growth so that when you get to that next round, you have enough momentum, growing by, ideally 10% week on week, the next investors will go, this is a really, really good proposition. And if you're not getting that growth because you're sticking your head in product all the time, you're not going to get there. And so I get that growth is really awkward. I get that sales is really awkward. Most of us as founders don't want to be doing sales, but you will be the best salesperson of your team, And also, to be honest, if you don't do the sales yourself, you're never going to know how to hire somebody. I meet so many people that have never done sales, that have never sold their own product. When they hire a junior salesperson to come on board, they don't know how to position it in the way that that junior person will thrive. So you're often setting up your sales hire to fail. So focus in on founder-led growth, whether that's product, marketing, or sales. Do it really well. I think most founders can easily get the first $500,000 to $1 million in revenue just through their own activity. Once it starts working, once you start figuring it out, once you start discovering, I mean, again, this is one of the interesting things, like, people focus on iterating the product. You need to iterate the market as well. You need to iterate your marketing and your sales. It's a growth thing. As we saw in Marta, she started at 1.5%. She tweaked the emails. It went to 2, it went to 3, it went to 4. This is the engine you're building. You're responsible for that growth engine, and you can't outsource it to anybody else. So that's the marketing side of the growth equation. Here are the product elements. One of the big things is time to value and the ability to constantly deliver value. I meet so many founders who have built wonderful products, but they put barriers in the way to value. They ask you to join a wait list that doesn't clear for 2 months. They don't actually show you what the product does on the homepage. There's no video, there's no interactive tour. And so 2 months later, when you kind of email the person, say, hey, you ready for your tour? They've probably forgotten that they even signed up, or they've gone somewhere else. When you do give them the tour, your product is really clunky to use and it's hard to sign up, and you stick them on an onboarding flow that requires to get loads of external information. And when you suddenly get there, you drop them into an empty page that is delivering no value. So that first run experience and being able to deliver the customer value on that first run experience, ideally, maybe once they've signed up, but if you can actually do it before they've signed up, even better. I had one coaching client I was working with who was really, really stuck because they were adding 1 or 2, 3 or 4 demos a day. People were joining up slow. The demos were happening at the time when users weren't really kind of engaged, but when the company was, and so people just weren't landing. Suddenly they decided, well, we're going to open our product up. We're not going to put demos in the way. We're not going to put a mailing list in the way. We're not going to put sign up in the way. We're going to stick the product free, easy to use on the homepage. And if people then want to sign up to save their status, to save their data, that's when we kind of get them. And all of a sudden, things blew up. Suddenly, they were having hundreds and thousands of people come to their site because they were getting that value immediately. And so delivering value immediately is important. But then once you've delivered it once, you need to keep doing it. I meet so many car lashes of product which deliver value 1 month and then don't deliver any value. And then they deliver it again next month and then don't deliver any value. Your job is to keep delivering value time and time again. A big part of this is leading to stickiness, making a product that brings people back, that kind of embeds people in their workflow. This is all about behavior change. Your job in those first few months is to change the old way that people use, to solve this problem and make your product the new solution. And so embedding this stickiness, and we'll get into some of the elements of that later, is really important. Obviously, motivation is big as well. As we said, it's big as part of the market side of the equation. It's also big as the kind of product side. If people are highly motivated, they'll stick around. They'll use your product. If people aren't motivated, then they won't. And a big part of motivation is after user education. Can you enroll people into an education program? Can you constantly drip feed them information that makes them feel motivated, that feel excited? They're on a learning journey. They're getting close to solving this problem. And this problem is kind of being solved to them through this drip of value. And then obviously one of the negatives is friction. I meet so many MVPs are understandably poorly designed. Often people will value adding more features than making this a really smooth product. I think friction is one of the biggest killers in, say, startups. I see a lot of founders that go, well, I don't understand why my customers aren't using my product because all of the features are there. But when you start to try and extract the value, the value is separated on 3 or 4 or 5 different screens. Often I'll see early stage users come and say, oh, like, I really love your product, because in my old way of doing things, I had to jump through loads of hoops and go to X page to do this and then another page to do that. And in your product, it's all joined together in a really, really simple workflow. That is having low friction versus high friction. A big part of your job as a product person isn't to invent new functionality and new value, but to make sure that value can be extracted with the minimal amount of friction as possible. So back to the questions. Are you or have you experienced any product issues that are related to having low motivation? People are dropping out through the process. Are you having and experiencing any issues around value? Like, are people getting value consistently enough? Ideally, your product should be delivering value on every use. The best products often deliver value 2 or 3 or 4 times a day. Look at products like Slack, for instance, where you are getting value. People, you come in and use the product multiple times a day. Slack actually have this sort of little warning KPI whereby if you've only used Slack 3 out of the last 5 days, you have a 50% chance of churning in the next week. And so their whole goal is to up that value delivery. Maybe it's not all, maybe you don't have a product that is daily use. Maybe it's weekly use or monthly use or intermittent use. That is much harder. It's much harder to sell products that you only get value out occasionally. One of my friends was the first product manager at Snick, a security tool. And one of the real problems with security tools is you set them up and they run in the background. So even if people are getting value, often you don't see them, you don't notice them. A lot of people treat security tools like gym membership. They just sit there, often not being used until you remember that you're paying for them, and then you kind of unsubscribe. And so my friend Anna basically every week would send out an automated email that showed people all the value they've been getting that week. This week, we have found these 5 security issues that you can fix. Here's the links to go and fix them. We've noticed 20 security breaches or attempted breaches. This is what you need to do about it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. These are all things that by demonstrating and bubbling up the value that you are delivering in the background can be really, really useful. So thank you very much for sharing all these things. Let me just have a look at where we are now. Just bear with me 1 second. So interesting, I'm quite surprised that people aren't seeing a value delivery problem. It's mostly audience motivation and product stickiness. I wouldn't be surprised actually if you do have value delivery problems and you're just noticing them. Again, I think a lot of the time founders think they fall in love with their product, like their kids. They think their kids are the most talented kid at school. And they don't understand when the teachers say, well, actually your kid's a little bit lazy or, isn't quite as, focused at school, et cetera, et cetera. I think being able to really, really watch people use the value, see and extract the value of your product is important. So, I'm a big fan of doing, usability tests and watching people get access to your product. And so, yeah, I'll be surprised if nobody here has a value problem, because actually this is generally the main reason why startups kind of struggle. People aren't accessing the value, or the value isn't big enough there to kind of make them motivated. So what can Marta do? Well, I would love it if you could give me a little bit of an idea about some of the solutions that Marta could kind of explore for her problem. And just as a reminder, she's got a big flow of customers coming in. She's really, really good at closing their customers, but people just aren't activating. And if they are activating, they're not sticking around for very long. So what are the kind of things that Marta can consider to help her problem? And while you do that, I'm going to have another sip of tea because I'm British and I can't go without a constant IV drip of tea. So I'll let you just add. While you're doing that, one of the things I loved, Jacob, about the previous iteration of Butter was your kind of like elevator hold music in the background. I would love to have some of your amazing elevator hold music playing as people kind of fill in fill in their
Yeah.
thoughts to your
I know,
questions.
Andy. We've got music coming up like next week. It just couldn't make it to launch day.
Oh, bless, 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 bless.
But we do have a little timer, so start that out. Here we go, 30 seconds.
Yep. So I think a big part, I think Magalay said, like checking the friction, going and doing a bit of a cognitive walkthrough of the product yourself. I see so many products that are designed, by designers in Figma, where, all the information is perfect that gets put in. There are no issues, there are no bumps, that people get deposited into this amazing looking, full landing page with all the data, et cetera, et cetera. And most people don't kind of design that kind of initial kind of slightly lumpy path. And so, the engineers go and build this thing. But when we're reviewing it and when we're showing it to our bosses, they're seeing this beautiful, happy path. And so I think actually really, really checking that first run use, checking where the friction is and how frustrating it is. I meet so many founders as well that, the last time they signed up for their product was literally on day one of launch, and the product has changed so much. And making sure that you're aware of like how the product is working today, like really, really dog food in your product is important. I think providing guidance for new users is good. I think again, like similar to Magley, Ben, reviewing the customer journey. Aha moments are massively important. There's a lot of stuff in my book around really, really understanding what that aha moment is. What is the thing you're trying to drive people to on that first run? And ideally, you want to get them to that aha moment on the first run. So people come and go, oh, I get what this is. I get what the value is. I'm now getting that value. I think that's really, really important. Okay, so back to the talk. So one of the first things I think is important is a lot of the time, as founders, we believe our product is amazing, and so we go out there and we really sell it. We have a website that kind of talks about how brilliant the product is going to be. Our marketing teams are really focused on selling the vision of the product, and so we get really excited. We get that motivation into our users, and then when we sign up, the product isn't quite there yet. The product isn't delivering the value that we've been promised. And we get disappointed and we struggle around and we kind of leave. And so it's really, really important. The first thing you need to do is align your positioning. Make sure that you're not overselling the product, that people get there and a bit disappointed. You can oversell a little, because I think if you have a team that is delivering at pace, then if you kind of promise where the product will be in a couple of months' time, and then people join and they're seeing like every few days, every week, a new feature, a new function, new capabilities are being added, things are getting better, things are being improved, then you have that ability to kind of close that gap. But I see so many teams where they promise the earth, and then when you actually start using the product, it's kind of mediocre. So you need to make sure your alignments, your positioning is aligned. And that really means that your marketing and your CEO and your CPO and your designers need to be talking together. And you need to have a really good understanding of where the product is. Again, it's this sort of sense of the proud parent going to parent teachers day and having one view of where the product is, thinking their kid is amazing at everything, and where the teachers think opposite. I think nailing the onboarding is really important. We looked at Marta. Marta was exploring giving a tour. I think as designers, we love doing tours because they seem producty. They're like, hey, we can solve this problem just by kind of having a bunch of little pop-up tooltips that appear that kind of teach people how to kind of navigate through the onboarding. The problem is most of us feel like we're quite sophisticated users. Whenever you see a tour, your immediate temptation is to click the Xbox and kind of dive into the product. We expect products to be built so well that they're kind of obvious. If they're not obvious, then you've got a problem with the usability of your product. So one of the things you need to do is lean into making sure that the product is clear. You need to make sure that people can get value quickly enough. And so you need to think about the flow and the journey. I think rather than tours, one of the best things to do is to have a little bit of a checkbox. It says, hey, like do step one, do step two, do step two, do step three, and this is where you get the value. People love being able to fill things in. If you come into your product and it's already sort of 30, 40% full and they've only got to do a little bit more work, upload their data, upload their X, upload their Y. Make sure that the things you're asking them to fill in though are important. Like if you're asking people to upload a photo of themselves and a photo isn't core to getting value, maybe you want to leave that to later. Maybe actually you want to kind of make sure that they connect to LinkedIn or they connect to their data source or whatever it is, so you can get that value really quickly. One of the easiest things actually, rather than kind of creating a tool, is to do an email drip campaign. I've seen some companies have got brilliant email drip campaigns that you sign up and then you get a nice series of structured emails that really help you get used to the product, get situated to the product, give you that motivation to try. And I see a lot of email drip campaigns where you get one email at the start that is kind of useless and mediocre and badly formatted that you ignore. And then you ignore the other two emails again, because like the first one was so bad. And the emails come like 2 months later at a point when you've already decided you don't want to use the product. So having really clear onboarding campaign. These onboarding emails are usually the easiest things to fix because they don't require any engineering talent. They just require you to do a bit of writing. And also don't bother with like HTML emails. Like the emails that work for me for really early stage customers are usually email that looks like it's coming from the founder. Hey Andy, it's Jacob here. Love to have you on board. This is the first thing I recommend you doing. Check this Loom video. Do this thing. Yada yada yada. One of the great things with onboarding emails is you can customize them as well. So if you notice that people haven't filled in a particular step in the onboarding process, you can nudge them towards that. If people haven't come back for 3 or 4 days, you can re-engage with them. Like if you don't have a sophisticated email onboarding campaign, like people will just come on board, they'll see an empty space, they'll leave. It's like coming to a party. You come to a party, the party's empty because you turned up early, you'll leave and you might decide that you want to come back an hour or two later. But once you get back home, once you get back to using your current product, you're not going out again. Obviously, we talked about removing friction. I think big, long email wait lists are a big lump of friction. If you are a well-known company, if you are a founder that's got a big brand, sure, you can launch a big campaign. And if you're Superhuman, for instance, the email client, you can have thousands or tens of thousands of people on your wait list because they're desperate to get through the door because they've got a high level of motivation. Most early stage founders or users don't have that high level of motivation. So forcing them to wait for 3 or 4 weeks until you get around to kind of servicing them, that motivation is drained. So get people in the door, get people using the product as quickly as possible, remove all the friction. Don't ask people to pick a new password, wait for a confirmation email. I mean, this is one of the things that frustrates me the most. Like quite often I'll sign up for a new product. It will say, it won't even let me use the product or get in until I've clicked the confirmation email. The confirmation email doesn't come for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I wait around for 2 or 3 minutes and I think, oh, I'll come back again. I come back, eventually when I look at my email in 3 or 4 or 5 hours, the confirmation emails come through, but now I'm busy doing something else. I think I'll deal with it later. It gets nudged further and further and further down the mailing list, also your email client, and you never come back. So maybe if you do have a problem with like email spam or sign up spam, you might want to have some kind of confirmation, but at the very least, do it later rather than earlier. And a lot of this is all around kind of embedding usage loops. I think one of the reasons that people aren't coming back to Marta's product, apart from the fact that they've been oversold, the onboarding doesn't really do anything, and there's lots of friction, is that people come once, they experience an empty product, they think to themselves, I'm going to come back again, and then they don't. And so usage loops are a way to bring people back. What can you do? What can you bake into your product that isn't necessarily a feature necessarily, but that will get people coming back? One of the most obvious usage loops is messaging. Maybe people have hit a milestone, send them a message and congratulate them. Maybe some data has come on board that they haven't seen. Email them, message them up, update the data, get them to come back to check out the new change in status. I think Figma have been really, really good. And I think Figma are a great example of a company that's lent into usage loops. when you use Figma and you share a project with a partner, and they write some feedback on your designs, you get a message saying to come back to the product to kind of explore what they've said. So all of these things, all these little techniques to keep people coming back. So they're using the product on a day-to-day basis. Because if over the first 2 or 3 or 4 weeks we're coming back every day, every other day, after a couple of weeks you bake into people's new workflow. If people use it once and then come back for 2 or 3 weeks, you're never going to get into people's workflow. So I believe that a big part of reaching product market fit is in the hands of design. I come from a design background. I would do. Product people are great, founders are great, but designers are really, really good at understanding user needs, user-centered designers. That's why we call user-centered designers. And so having designers understand where the friction points are, having designers understand why the value isn't being delivered early enough. Like, these are the kind of things that maybe don't appear on a typical backlog. Backlogs are really, really great for adding new functionality. New functionality always bubbles up to the top. It's very rare that you get someone that says, hey, look, there's too much friction in the sign-up process. We want to improve the sign-up process. If you're judging improving the sign-up process versus adding new value, people always add the new value. And so I think having designers on board to advocate for removing friction, for delivering value quickly, yada, 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 is massively important. I actually think in the early stages, all the companies I've met that have reached product market fit have often done so, not purely because of their engineering team, but because they've got a really passionate design person and design focused product manager really, really driving that product market fit. Actually, going a little bit further, like I often advise teams or companies to sort of divide their teams because of this issue. If you have, and again, it doesn't have to be a big team to do this. Like, you might have 3 or 4 engineers that are working on delivering new features and maybe 1 designer, and you might have another engineer and another designer, or a growth PM or whatever, who are focusing on the growth side of the equation. And the way this generally works is that feature teams are adding new capabilities, growth teams are making the existing capabilities easy to find. Because arguably, if people aren't finding the existing value, adding new value isn't going to help. It's just going to obscure things. So having a separate dedicated team that are all about unlocking that value, making sure that people use that feature, 2% more, 5% more, 10% more, making sure that people are coming back again and again and again, while you've got another team delivering new capability. If you don't have, if your team is smaller, if your team is only 3 or 4 people, then maybe you need to break it up into sprints. Maybe 3 weeks out of 4, you have sprints that are focused on feature delivery, and then 1 week out of 4, you have a sprint that's focused on unlocking existing value and allowing your existing users to access that value. The very, very last element of the growth equation, and I know we're coming out of time now, is virality. And virality is the sort of quality of your product that means that people are going to share it with other people. Now, final kind of couple of notes. I'm a huge fan of product-led growth, but PLG only really works when you have users. So I see so many founders that are saying, hey, I'm not going to do product marketing or sales. I'm going to let my product do the selling for me. That works great once you're, reach PMF, but it doesn't really work before then. So most products, even, kind of really viral products, need that kickstart of users, and that typically comes from founder-led sales and founder-led marketing. So there's a growth equation. Those 7 elements that I've found over time and time again have the biggest effect on growth. So finally, I'd love to just understand, which part of the growth equation do you think you've got your biggest challenge at the moment? Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. And based on this talk, is the one growth tactic that you would like to focus on moving forward? Maybe you've come away from this talk and said, okay, great, I've got an understanding of what's going on with my product. What am I going to try tomorrow? Brilliant stuff. Well, look, thank you so much for sharing all of your thoughts. I'm sure you're still busily, frantically typing. I want to thank you for the time. If you want to go and buy the book now, it's available. You can grab it on Amazon. If you want to read the first 3 chapters, you can sign up to the waitlist and download the first 3 chapters. And yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out on social, and I'd love to chat some more. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and thanks a ton, Andy. This was awesome. I hope you guys got as much insight from this as I did, in spite of me also doing other product hunty stuff on the side. So wanted to just share 2 things before you guys leave. Firstly, we're running a full event today called Scene on Scenes, which I guess you already signed up to here. And we've got loads of other amazing speakers going. Although, like, I'm very honored that Andy wanted to kick it off first here. And secondly, I'm just gonna do it one more time. You guys know what to do. Share it with your family, share it with your friends, share it with your kids, have your kids share it with their schools, have all this love on Product Hunt really goes a very long way for us to successfully launch this new product, and for Butter to persist a long time into the future. So please do that.
And just really quickly, Jacob, there's a whole big section on Product Hunt launches in the book as well. Product Hunt is so important for early stage founders. It's a great way of discovery, but it's also a great way of engaging with the audience, of reminding people that you exist, getting people back. And obviously, if you do get that number 1, 2, or 3 slot, celebrating with them. And then obviously also, if you get the 1, 2, or 3 slot, you also might end up being product of the month, or maybe even get a golden kitty. These things can be really, really important. That's the kind of annual awards that they have every year. So I'd literally, just as Jacob was talking, went along and gave an upvote for these guys. I think they're doing a really good job. So it'd be lovely if you guys could do something similar.
Thanks, Andy. And that's so cool. Oh man, Product Hunt launches are like so complex to execute, and this has been one way for us to execute it, showing our product all day and basically just screaming to the world. All right. Thanks for the time, guys. I'm also just posting a link to the next event upcoming here at 11. It's the Future of Facilitation with Jonathan Courtney from AJ Smart. And he normally does a pretty cool show. So for those of you that want to hop in there, I very much recommend it. So, thanks, guys. And thank you, Andy. And have a lovely day. Bye, all.